Africa is often portrayed in Western media as being stuck in poverty or war. But Africa has a rich history full of successful empires and influential people. And one African queen is so badass that even Google had to make an entire video about her. In today's video, I'll be looking at how this woman took on the might of the Roman Empire and won. So let's get into it. When most people hear the term Egyptian queen, Cleopatra is probably the first person that comes to mind. However, Cleopatra was actually Greek, not Egyptian. If you've seen my previous videos on the Battle of Actium and the fall of Cleopatra, then you may already be familiar with him. Anyway, as the general in charge of Egypt, Agrippa decided to set his sights on the neighboring kingdom of Kush. And in 25 BC, he led an invasion force into Kush. However, researchers believe it may have taken place near the site of the modern town of Khazar-Ibrim. Historians are still unsure exactly what was discussed in this treaty, as the original document is lost to history. One reason for this is that most mainstream history is written from a Eurocentric perspective. In other words, it focuses primarily on the Middle East and Europe instead of Africa. Unfortunately, this has resulted in many important African leaders being left out of history books. Rome actually lost several battles against smaller, less powerful nations. You can watch my video on Boudica, Queen of the Iceni tribe, to learn more about this. After establishing peace with Rome, Amanirenas continued to reign over Kush until her death around 10 AD. Her statue sits in the Sudanese capital of Khartoum, and there's even a military airport named after her. In modern Sudan, she is seen as a symbol of independence and freedom from foreign invaders. However, Kush would eventually be conquered by the Kingdom of Aksum in the 4th century AD. Many historians believe that Kush was destroyed due to the introduction of a new type of iron weapon called the hadram. The Kingdom of Aksum used these curved swords to great effect, easily slicing through shields and armor. What makes Rome's loss against Kush so remarkable is that Rome underestimated their enemy. Rome thought that Kush was a small, insignificant kingdom, but Kush had a large army and was led by a brilliant queen. A second reason is that our knowledge of African history before the 15th century is limited because many historical texts were lost when European colonizers destroyed Nubian temples and burned ancient manuscripts. You may think that Dio would be biased against the Kushites, but his writings actually portray them in a very positive light. He marvels at the size of their army and their ability to use guerrilla tactics. Dio also gives credit to Queen Amanirenas, describing her as a strong leader who never gave up. His account reads, "Although the queen was a woman, she was not in any respect inferior to the men. Indeed, she was a fit consort for one of the gods, so beautiful was her appearance." But we do know that Rome recognized Kush as an independent state and left Egypt alone for the next 70 years. This settlement dates back to the time of the Kush Empire and served as a fortress protecting the border between Kush and Egypt. Their capital city, Meroe, was an urban center with paved roads, public buildings, and houses with plumbing. The Kush Empire also developed a unique alphabet and wrote extensively on subjects like religion, philosophy, and law. They even minted their own coins and used them as a form of currency. Sadly, most of this evidence was destroyed during the Arab conquest of Nubia in the 13th century. We know that Queen Amanirenas used guerrilla tactics to harass the Roman army and may have used the terrain to her advantage. Some people will claim that Africans have accomplished anything worth talking about, or that they were always living in tribes. But if you look into it, you'll find that these claims are false. For example, many African kingdoms built impressive structures like the Great Pyramids and Sphinx, developed advanced mathematics and medicine, and created powerful militaries. The battle could have been a decisive moment in the conflict as the Romans were trapped between the Kushite army and the River Nile, making retreat almost impossible. It's unclear how far Agrippa's army penetrated into Kushite territory, but he was eventually defeated by Kushite Queen Amanirenas. She was the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic Kingdom of Egypt, which was founded by Alexander the Great's general amassing armies, building alliances, and wielding deadly poisons like a pro. These writers provide us with enough information to piece together the story of how Amniris and her general Natakamani defeated Rome. According to historical accounts, the Romans started off by sacking the wealthy city of Meroe, but this proved to be a bad move. As Dio Cassius states, they did not expect the barbarians to resist them, But they soon found out that they were mistaken, for those people were brave and warlike, and their queen was able to turn the tables upon them. While Rome is remembered as being very tolerant of different cultures, they were definitely not tolerant of other kingdoms existing in the lands they claimed. While Agrippa's army was celebrating their victory in Mero, Queen Amanirenas and her army ambushed them from behind. Historical records tell us that the Romans suffered heavy losses and their general was forced to retreat to Elephantine Island in the middle of the Nile River. From here, Agrippa attempted to rally his forces and counterattack the Cushites, but to no avail. Dio Cassius writes that the Cushites harassed the Romans on all sides and killed many of them until Agrippa finally sued for peace. Most of Kush's wealth came from controlling the trade routes that connected the sub-Saharan region with the Mediterranean world. And during the 8th century BC, Kush was able to defeat the Assyrians and take over much of Egypt. The Kushite Empire would eventually collapse in the 6th century BC after the kingdom of Aksum invaded their northern territories. Although Nubia was no longer a major power, their new rulers, the kingdom of Mero, still held great wealth and influence. By the time Augustus Caesar became the first emperor of Rome, he controlled most of the Mediterranean but was still trying to solidify his control over the Egyptian region. As you can imagine, there was some local resistance. So he sent out generals to put down these rebellions. Soon after Cleopatra died in 30 BC, Egypt would become a province of the Roman Empire. But Cleopatra wasn't the only African queen Rome feared. There was another queen who took on Rome's forces and won. Her name was Queen Amanirenas of Kush. To really understand her story, we need to rewind the clock back to 25 BC when Rome and Kush were fighting over control of Egypt's southern neighbor. Kush, also known as Nubia, was located in what is now northern Sudan. Like Egypt, Kush was situated along the Nile River and traded extensively with Egypt. This trading relationship was mutually beneficial because Kush supplied Egypt with gold and ivory, while Egypt provided Kush with manufactured goods and grain. At its peak, the Kushite Empire stretched from the Mediterranean Sea south to the fourth cataract of the Nile. One of these generals was a guy named Marcus Agrippa. There's very little written about Queen Amanirenas, and all of our information has to be gathered from small details in the writings of historians like Plutarch and Dio Cassius. The Romans had marched deep into Kushite territory without realizing that they were being followed by Queen Amanirenas. To this day, the location of this decisive battle is unknown. Dio Cassius goes on to say that after peace was established between Rome and Kush, the Roman general gave the queen gifts and withdrew his army. So why don't we know about Queen Amanirenas? Well, despite the fact that she beat the Romans, she's absent from most global history books. It turns out that there is a lot of misinformation out there about African history. The kingdom of Kush is a perfect example of this. While Dio Cassius describes the Kushites as barbarians, Queen Amanirenas proved that they were far from uncivilized. Most people think of Rome as being unbeatable, but the reality is they weren't. Much of what we know about Rome's defeat comes from the writings of Dio Cassius, a Roman historian. Unfortunately, the story of Queen Amanirenas doesn't end on a positive note. Despite the tragic ending to her story, Queen Amanirenas is a legendary figure in Sudanese resistance narratives. I hope you enjoyed learning about this amazing queen. Subscribe for more stories they tried to erase, only on History Rewritten. See you next time.